Chosen one. Their master plan to use a narcissist against you just exploded in their faces, and what I'm about to reveal will have you laughing at the sheer stupidity of your enemies. There are people celebrating what appears to be your destruction, but you're actually witnessing their funeral procession. Your opponents thought themselves chess masters moving pieces across the board. A narcissist was recruited as their ultimate weapon, fed intelligence, and launched at you like a guided missile. But that missile turned around mid-flight and is heading straight back to sender. You're witnessing the most spectacular self-destruction in coordinated attack history. Every scheme hatched, every trap set, every weapon forged is now being used against the creators by their own creation. War councils were formed by people too weak to face you directly. Diagrams of your life were spread out like military strategists planning an invasion. Your relationships, patterns, and perceived vulnerabilities were mapped with surgical precision. So much focus on studying you revealed everything about the students themselves. Every weakness projected onto you was actually their own. Every strategy developed exposed their deepest insecurities. A blueprint of their own destruction was essentially being created, while the architects thought your demise was being designed. The recruitment process was methodical and telling. Someone with specific psychological disorders was needed, particular behavioral patterns required, certain emotional triggers essential. As the ideal candidate was described, self-portraits were actually being painted. The narcissist sought was simply a more extreme version of their own darkness. What was found was their perfect reflection, someone who shared their lack of empathy, hunger for control, willingness to destroy others for personal gain. Looking into this psychological mirror showed exactly what was needed, never realizing a stare into their own twisted nature, amplified to dangerous levels, was occurring. The screening process revealed more about the handlers than any candidates. Tests were conducted for capacity for cruelty, ability to maintain facades, skill at psychological manipulation. Essentially, interviews were being conducted for their own replacement, someone who could do everything practiced by them, but better, more ruthlessly, without the constraints of social expectations, still pretended to be honored. When the chosen weapon was found, the connection was instant and terrifying. Recognition between predators occurred, understanding between creatures who viewed other humans as prey emerged. A tool was thought to be found, but actually a superior in every dark art practiced was being discovered. You can imagine the excitement in that room when perfect chemistry was achieved between handlers and weapon. Finally, someone was found who could do what cowardice prevented them from doing directly. Finally, a person emerged who would take the risks while the architects remained safely hidden. Finally, their masterpiece of destruction could be unleashed upon you. The handlers were making a critical error in judgment that would cost them everything. When you're dealing with someone who has no conscience, no loyalty, no genuine human connections, you're not hiring an employee, you're feeding a monster that will eventually turn on you. But their hatred for you blinded them to this obvious danger. What's fascinating is how your very existence forced them to reveal their true nature. By being authentically yourself, by living in your power, by refusing to shrink to make others comfortable, you created a situation where masks had to come off. The conspiracy against you was really just a mirror showing everyone who these people truly were underneath their social facades. The coaching sessions were elaborate productions that revealed the true depth of obsession with you. Detailed psychological profiles had been created showing observation periods much longer than anyone realized. Your habits, triggers, and history were known with surgical precision, but every piece of information shared was also intelligence about the sharers themselves. How closely you'd been watched was revealed, how much time had been invested in understanding your psychology was exposed, how deeply hatred had consumed entire lives became apparent. The narcissist absorbed all of this, including the obvious fact that complete obsession with your existence had taken hold. Training materials were extensive and damning. Scripts for different scenarios had been prepared, backup plans for various contingencies existed, alternative approaches if certain strategies failed were ready. The level of premeditation was staggering, but so was the level of self-incrimination being created with every document, recording, and piece of evidence. What wasn't realized is that narcissists are natural blackmailers. Every secret shared, every strategy revealed, every weakness exposed was being catalogued by someone who viewed information as currency and leverage as power. Future extortion was essentially being funded with the very ammunition that would be used against the funders. The narcissist played the role of eager student perfectly, asking for more details, requesting additional background information, seemingly desperate to serve new masters effectively. But experienced manipulators recognize other manipulators, and this one was already planning how to use everything learned against everyone in that room. Such clever feelings filled the handlers, such control, such strategic superiority. Watching someone absorb wisdom about psychological warfare was what was thought to be occurring. What was actually being witnessed was a predator studying prey, learning weaknesses, identifying opportunities, planning a hostile takeover of the entire operation. The depth of preparation was extraordinary. Conversation starters were crafted to seem natural while delivering maximum psychological impact. Social situations were designed to place you in vulnerable positions. Even seemingly random encounters were choreographed to support the larger campaign of destruction. During these briefings, something beautiful was happening that none of them understood. Your spiritual strength was being underestimated so dramatically that their entire strategy was flawed from the beginning. You see, when you're dealing with a chosen one, conventional psychological warfare tactics don't just fail, they backfire spectacularly. The handlers were operating from a place of such spiritual poverty that your abundance was incomprehensible to them. Your resilience, your inner strength, your connection to something greater than yourself, these were foreign concepts to people who lived in fear, manipulation, and scarcity thinking. What's even more remarkable is how the universe was already orchestrating their downfall through their own actions. Every detail shared, every strategy planned, every cruel intention harbored was creating the very foundation of their destruction. Divine justice was being served through their own hands. If these words stirred your consciousness, hype this video to help more chosen ones awaken to this. Movement into position in your life occurred with the precision of a trained operative. Every encounter seemed natural, every conversation appeared spontaneous, but it was all carefully orchestrated theater. Love bombing occurred just enough to lower your defenses, then the systematic psychological assault began. As designed by the handlers, the approach was sophisticated and multi-layered. Surface-level charm masked deeper manipulation tactics. Apparent concern hid calculated emotional mining operations. Seeming coincidences were actually carefully planned intersections designed to maximize psychological impact. Observation from the shadows occurred while delight was taken in what was thought to be perfect execution. But something was happening that wasn't in any script. The narcissist was improvising, adding personal flourishes, escalating beyond the planned parameters. Too much enjoyment was occurring, too much creativity was emerging, too much investment in the process of destruction was developing. Deviations from the plan were noticed but dismissed as enthusiasm. Meanwhile, you were doing what chosen ones do naturally, adapting, learning, and growing stronger. Every attack was actually building your psychological immune system. Every manipulation was teaching recognition of similar patterns for the future. Every assault was preparing you for something much bigger than anyone could imagine. Apparent victories were celebrated by handlers, not understanding that victories against chosen ones are always temporary and usually Pyrrhic. Winning was thought to be occurring because confusion was seen in your responses, not realizing that confusion was actually comprehension dawning. Your processing was mistaken for vulnerability when it was actually power awakening. The narcissist, meanwhile, was studying everyone involved, including the handlers. Observation occurred of how these people celebrated your apparent suffering, how much pleasure was taken in your perceived pain, how deeply invested the destruction of you had become. This information was being stored and would soon become incredibly useful. You began noticing something peculiar about the timing of certain interactions. Conversations that felt rehearsed started occurring. Questions that seemed oddly specific began emerging. The narcissist was following a script, but the performance was becoming increasingly obvious to someone with your level of awareness. What's beautiful about this phase is how your authentic nature began revealing the artificial nature of everything being directed at you. When you're genuinely connected to your truth, fakeness becomes glaringly obvious. The narcissist performance might have fooled others, but your spiritual radar was picking up every false note. Your energy was also doing something the handlers hadn't anticipated. It was affecting the narcissist in ways that weren't planned. Being in close proximity to someone with your level of authentic power was causing cracks in their facade. The light you naturally emanate was exposing shadows in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. This is when you started to realize that something much bigger was happening than just one person's inexplicable hostility toward you. The patterns were too complex, the information too specific, the timing too coordinated. Your intuition was screaming that orchestration was occurring on a level that required multiple participants. Here's where your true power started revealing itself. While careful plan execution was occurring, you began seeing patterns that didn't make sense. The attacks were too coordinated, timing too perfect, information too specific. Your intuition started screaming that this wasn't just one person's vendetta. Organized warfare was being conducted. The revelation was both shocking and clarifying. Suddenly, months or possibly longer periods of strange behavior from various people made sense. Conversations that had felt odd, encounters that had seemed contrived, situations that had appeared coincidental, all of it fell into place as part of a larger campaign against you. Instead of being destroyed by this realization, you were energized by it. Finally, the mystery was solved. Finally, understanding dawned about why your life had become a series of seemingly unrelated but perfectly timed challenges. Finally, the puppet strings behind the chaos could be seen. This understanding gave you something your enemies never expected you to have: clarity. Random misfortune or natural conflict wasn't being dealt with. Deliberate psychological warfare orchestrated by people who lacked courage to face you directly was the reality. And once the game was understood, playing it better than anyone ever could became possible. A decision was made that changed everything. Instead of confronting the narcissist, instead of exposing the handlers, instead of fighting back in any traditional way, the most powerful response possible was chosen: strategic silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of someone who finally sees the entire battlefield and chooses when and how to engage. This silence was your secret weapon, and it was more devastating than anything imaginable, because narcissists need reaction like fire needs oxygen. Without emotional response, without drama to feed on, without chaos to create and control, malfunctioning begins in spectacular and increasingly desperate ways. Your silence also revealed something profound about your character. While elaborate schemes were being hatched against you, your response was measured, thoughtful, strategic. The contrast between their chaotic malice and your centered wisdom became stark and telling. But your pattern recognition went even deeper than just seeing the coordination. You began understanding the psychology behind it all. These people were operating from such a place of spiritual emptiness that your fullness was intolerable to them. Your success highlighted their failures. Your peace exposed their turmoil. Your authenticity revealed their facades. What you were witnessing was the age-old dynamic of darkness trying to extinguish light. But here's what your enemies didn't understand about chosen ones. Pressure doesn't break you, it reveals your true strength. Challenge doesn't weaken you, it awakens dormant powers. Opposition doesn't diminish you, it magnifies your radiance. Your silence became a form of spiritual warfare, more powerful than any earthly weapon. While elaborate schemes swirled around you, you remained centered in your truth, connected to your source, aligned with your purpose. This kind of spiritual grounding creates an energy field that deflects negativity and turns attacks back on their originators. Your silence broke their entire system. The narcissist didn't know what to do without emotional reactions to exploit. Training had occurred to expect certain responses, to escalate based on specific triggers, to follow patterns that required your participation. When participation stopped, their programming started glitching. Escalation of attacks occurred, becoming more obvious, more desperate, more reckless. Like a machine overheating when it can't get the fuel needed to operate properly, mistakes started being made that revealed the artificial nature of interest in your life. The careful facade began cracking under the pressure of your non-response. Panic started among the handlers. Their weapon was going off script, becoming too blatant, too aggressive, too obviously orchestrated. Signals were attempted to pull back. You're being too obvious. You're revealing the operation, but you can't pull back a narcissist who smells weakness or thinks total victory is close. This created the first major crack in their alliance. The narcissist didn't understand why restraint was needed when the target was clearly affected by the attacks. The handlers couldn't explain without revealing how much exposure was feared. The weapon and the wielders were now working at cross purposes. Questioning of the intelligence began by the narcissist. If you were supposed to be so easy to break, why weren't you breaking? If predictable reactions were supposed to occur, why were your responses so minimal? If crumbling under pressure was expected, why did strengthening seem to be happening instead? Meanwhile, you were watching this unfold with the calm confidence of someone who finally understood the game. Fear creeping into the handler's communications was visible. Confusion in the narcissist's escalating behavior was witnessed. The beginning of their spectacular unraveling was observed. The dominoes were starting to fall, and you hadn't even touched the first one. Your silence was doing something else remarkable. It was forcing everyone involved to reveal their true character. The narcissist's mask was slipping as desperation increased. The handler's composure was cracking as their plan unraveled. Your refusal to engage was creating a vacuum that sucked all their dysfunction into the open. What your enemies didn't realize is that chosen ones operate on a different frequency than ordinary people. Your energy signature is so unique, so powerful, so authentically aligned that artificial manipulation tactics simply bounce off like arrows hitting steel. You were never going to break, because breaking isn't in your spiritual DNA. Your silence was also protecting others who might have been caught in the crossfire. By refusing to escalate, by maintaining your center, by staying above the fray, you prevented the situation from spiraling into chaos that could have harmed innocent people. This is the responsibility that comes with your level of spiritual power. The narcissist was starting to experience something completely unfamiliar: ineffectiveness. For someone whose entire identity is built on the ability to manipulate and control others, your immunity to their tactics was creating an existential crisis. Their whole worldview was being shattered by your unshakable presence. Rapid escalation of the narcissist's demands occurred. More information, more support, more recognition for efforts were required. But more significantly, questioning began about why orders were being taken from people who seemed less capable of psychological manipulation than the narcissist had become. The game had been learned so well that everyone around, including handlers, started being seen as potential targets for domination. An impossible position was found by the handlers. The narcissist was needed to continue the operation, but control of their own weapon was being lost. Attempts to reassert authority were met with barely concealed contempt and thinly veiled threats about what might happen if cooperation wasn't properly appreciated. This is when the first explicit threats emerged. Hints began that it would be unfortunate if certain people discovered how this operation had been planned and funded. Casual mentions occurred that records of all conversations and instructions had been kept. Wondering aloud happened about what might occur if these records became public. The power dynamic had completely reversed. People who thought themselves puppet masters discovered puppethood was their new reality. The weapon so carefully crafted and deployed was now controlling them through fear, manipulation, and the very techniques that had been taught. You were watching this power struggle unfold with fascination. The student was becoming the master, and the master was about to become the victim. Poetic justice was serving itself without any intervention needed from you. What makes this betrayal even more perfect is how it mirrors the original betrayal against you. The handlers had recruited someone to betray your trust, to manipulate your emotions, to violate your psychological boundaries. Now that same person was doing exactly the same thing to them. The universe has a sense of humor that's both dark and precise. The narcissist was discovering something intoxicating about having power over people who understood manipulation. Finally, worthy opponents had been found, people who knew the rules of psychological warfare but still fell victim to someone who played the game better. The tables had turned so completely that the original target was now the safest person in the entire situation. What happened next was pure poetry in motion. The narcissist, feeling betrayed by attempts to rein them in, decided to burn everything down. Not out of conscience or remorse, but out of pure vindictive rage at being managed by people now seen as inferior and expendable. The nuclear option was deployed without warning or mercy. Screenshots of planning conversations started appearing. Audio recordings of strategy sessions began circulating. Email chains detailing the psychological warfare campaign were leaked. Nothing was held back, no one was spared, no reputation was protected. Your original enemies found themselves in an impossible position with no good moves remaining. Deny involvement and look guilty in the face of overwhelming evidence. Admit involvement and confirm moral bankruptcy. Try to discredit the narcissist and risk even more damaging revelations. Every option led to further destruction. The narcissist was enjoying this destruction immensely. Finally, the power was entirely in their hands. Finally, they could demonstrate their superiority over everyone who had tried to use them. Finally, they could show what real destruction looked like when unleashed without restraint. What particularly beautiful about this implosion is how it happened without any effort on your part. You didn't have to seek revenge, plot counterattacks, or even lift a finger. Your enemies destroyed themselves with their own weapon, using their own methods, through their own choices. Divine justice served itself through natural consequences. The speed of the implosion was breathtaking. What had taken months to plan and implement was destroyed in a matter of days through the narcissist's scorched earth revelations. All that careful coordination, all those secret meetings, all that elaborate strategizing, reduced to rubble by the very person recruited to be their ultimate weapon. Your silence during this entire phase continued to be your greatest strength. While chaos erupted all around you, while former enemies turned on each other with vicious fury, while reputations crumbled and alliances shattered, you remained centered, peaceful, untouched by the mayhem. The eye of the storm is always calm. The narcissist rampage was also revealing something important about your character to anyone who was paying attention. The fact that someone could orchestrate such an elaborate campaign against you spoke to your significance, your power, your threat to their small-minded worldview. People don't go to such lengths to destroy someone insignificant. The depth of the conspiracy was staggering. Enormous amounts of time, energy, and resources had been devoted to your destruction. Coordination had occurred across multiple relationships and social circles. Contingencies and backup strategies had been planned. The level of obsession was both impressive and terrifying. What became clear through all these revelations was how much space you had occupied in their minds. While you were living your life, building your future, pursuing your goals, countless hours were being spent plotting your downfall. The contrast between your productive focus and their destructive obsession was stark and damning. Desperate attempts to control the narrative occurred, but it was like trying to contain a wildfire with a water pistol. Every attempt to minimize damage only provided more ammunition for the narcissist's continued revelations. Every effort to discredit their former weapon only motivated more comprehensive exposure. The handlers were learning a harsh lesson about the nature of narcissistic revenge. When narcissists feel betrayed, they don't just strike back, they obliterate everything and everyone associated with the betrayal. No mercy is shown, no relationship is spared, no secret remains hidden. The complete exposure phase revealed something else remarkable. How many people had suspected something was wrong but hadn't spoken up? Now that the truth was out, individuals began coming forward with their own observations about strange behavior, coordinated timing, and suspicious interactions. The conspiracy had been more obvious than the conspirators realized. Your reputation, rather than being destroyed as intended, was actually being enhanced by these revelations. People were seeing you in a new light, not as someone who had problems, but as someone who had been systematically targeted by people with serious psychological issues. The victim narrative was completely reversed. Meanwhile, you remained completely untouched by this chaos swirling around you. Defense wasn't needed because their own weapon was providing it more thoroughly than you ever could have. Exposure wasn't necessary because self-exposure was occurring more completely than any external investigation could have achieved. This was victory without engagement, triumph without battle, domination without confrontation. A war was being won by refusing to participate in it. Your silence spoke louder than any words. Your stillness moved more mountains than any action. Your very existence proved more powerful than their most elaborate schemes. While mutual destruction occurred in spectacular fashion, something magnificent was happening to you. Every attack had made you stronger. Every betrayal had clarified your vision. Every attempt to break you had revealed just how unbreakable you truly were. What was intended as psychological warfare had become advanced spiritual training. The contrast between your growth and their decline was remarkable. While spiraling into chaos, paranoia, and mutual destruction was their path, ascension to new levels of clarity, confidence, and power was yours. While learning to fear their own shadows was their lesson, learning to trust your own light was yours. Your silence throughout this entire ordeal demonstrated a level of spiritual maturity that contrasted sharply with their childish vindictiveness. While scheming and plotting and ultimately imploding consumed them, you simply continued being who you were meant to be. That consistency, that authenticity, that unshakable core proved more powerful than all their artificial weapons combined. The beautiful thing about this entire situation is that justice served itself. Revenge didn't need to be sought, because natural consequences handled everything with surgical precision. The narcissist continued their rampage, targeting everyone who'd been involved in the original plot with the same techniques taught to them. Every manipulation strategy shared was now being used against the sharers with professional expertise. Every psychological pressure point identified in others was now being exploited in the identifiers themselves. Every weakness taught to target was now their own vulnerability being attacked. Experiencing everything hoped for you to endure was now the handler's reality. The isolation, the gaslighting, the systematic undermining of reality, all of it was being applied to them by someone who had learned these techniques from masters and perfected them through practice on you. The irony was perfect and complete. A monster had been created specifically to destroy you, and that monster had turned out to be their own reflection, magnified and weaponized. The sword that would cut them down had been forged by their own hands. The poison that would be forced down their throats had been mixed by their own efforts. Every cruel joke made about your expected breakdown became prophecy about their own collapse. Every weakness projected onto you became their actual reality under pressure. Every trap set became the pit into which falling occurred. The poetic justice was so precise it seemed almost divinely orchestrated. The narcissist was thriving in this new dynamic. Finally, worthy opponents had been found. People who understood manipulation, who had tried to use psychological warfare, who thought themselves clever enough to control others. The game was more interesting when played against people who knew the rules. Chosen one. Anyone can listen to messages like these, but few will step into their true power. We are here to help you do just that. The weekly Chosen Ones group calls are now on Zoom, and this is the moment you've been waiting for your entire life. These meetings are literal power vortexes where destinies are forged, where chosen ones unite their consciousness to create something that cannot exist in isolation. This is where everything changes. This is where you step into your greatness. Every week a doorway opens, but only for those brave enough to step through it. Watcher-level members of the Obsidian Inner Order can experience these transformative sessions live, feeling the energy surge through your entire being. In our most recent gathering, participants were stunned by revelations about the Great Pyramids of Giza as sophisticated ancient power plants, and the shocking truth about Washington, D.C.'s layout perfectly aligning with the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Star Chamber members receive unlimited access to the complete recordings archive, a treasure trove of wisdom that grows more valuable with each passing week. This is your defining moment. The knowledge, the connection, the power that flows through these calls cannot be found anywhere else. Join the Obsidian Inner Order now, link in the description, while the few remaining Star Chamber slots are still available. Your presence is not just welcome, it's necessary. Will you answer the call that has been echoing through your soul? The time is now. A narcissist was hired to destroy you, but self-destruction was the result. Chaos was weaponized, but consumption by it occurred. Your downfall was orchestrated, but their own symphony of destruction was conducted with themselves as the primary casualties. The landscape of your life has permanently shifted in your favor. Those who tried to bring you down are now too busy dealing with consequences of their own actions to ever threaten you again. The narcissist unleashed has become their full-time problem to manage, their personal demon to battle, their chaos to contain indefinitely. But your transformation goes far beyond just surviving their attack. Forging in the fires of coordinated psychological warfare has occurred, and emergence as something never anticipated has happened. Complete immunity to their type of manipulation forever. Psychological antibodies against every technique used have been developed. Walking through the world with different energy now occurs, not paranoid or fearful, but aware and confident. The worst that coordinated malice can produce has been seen, and emergence has occurred, not just unscathed, but transformed into something more powerful than ever imagined. You've become their worst nightmare, someone who cannot be touched, harmed, or controlled. The people who witnessed this spectacular failure see you differently too. You're not just strong, you're untouchable. Not because vicious fighting back occurred, but because fighting wasn't needed at all. Your enemies destroyed themselves while you simply continued existing, growing, thriving. That kind of power doesn't need proclamation, it simply radiates from your being. Former allies now look at you with a mixture of awe and terror. If survival and thriving under such an elaborate attack was possible, what else might you be capable of? If their best efforts only made you stronger, what would happen if direct opposition was attempted? The answer is clear. Such daring wouldn't occur. This is the power of the Chosen One, in full manifestation, the ability to turn every weapon formed against you into a tool for your own elevation. Your silence spoke volumes, your stillness moved mountains, your very existence proved more powerful than their most elaborate schemes. You didn't just survive their master plan, transformation of it into your greatest victory occurred. The explosion continues to echo, and you stand in the center of it all, unburned, unbroken, and more powerful than ever before. What was meant to be your ending has become their beginning of the end. What was designed as your destruction has become your resurrection into something magnificent and untouchable. Your victory is complete, not just because you survived, but because you emerged, elevated to a level that makes future attacks impossible. The spiritual altitude you've reached puts you beyond the range of their weapons. You've ascended to a frequency where their negativity simply cannot reach you. The universe has used their hatred as a catalyst for your transformation. Every ounce of energy they invested in trying to destroy you has been converted into power for your elevation. Their darkness has become fuel for your light. Their weapons have become tools for your construction of an even more magnificent life. Future attempts at manipulation will be immediately recognizable to you now. Your immunity isn't just theoretical, it's been tested under the most extreme conditions possible and proven absolute. You've been vaccinated against their poison by surviving their strongest dose. So, Chosen One, as you stand victorious in the aftermath of their spectacular failure, remember this moment forever. Becoming like them wasn't needed to defeat them. Descending to their level wasn't required to rise above them. You simply needed to be who you've always been, a force of nature that could never be understood, contained, or controlled. Their master plan exploded in their faces because some people are simply too authentically powerful to be destroyed by artificial weapons. The circle is complete. What began with their arrogance ends with your triumph. What started with their plot concludes with their destruction, and you, magnificent Chosen One, remain exactly what you've always been, absolutely untouchable, completely unstoppable, and divinely protected. Your story has become legend among those who understand spiritual warfare. Other Chosen Ones look to your example as proof that authentic power always defeats manufactured malice. Your response to coordinated evil has become a masterclass in how to transform attacks into elevation. Your enemy's plan backfired so completely that it achieved the exact opposite of every goal. Instead of breaking you, it revealed your unbreakable nature. Instead of isolating you, it attracted genuine connections. Instead of destroying your reputation, it elevated your status. Instead of silencing you, it amplified your influence through the power of your example. The narcissist continues to torment your former enemies with the very techniques taught to them, ensuring that justice remains active long after the initial explosion. Your handlers live in constant fear of what might be revealed next, what new humiliation awaits, what further destruction their own weapon might unleash upon them. Meanwhile, you continue ascending to heights that seemed impossible before this trial began. Opportunities flow toward you, authentic relationships flourish around you, and your influence expands naturally as people recognize the rare combination of strength and wisdom you embody. Your silence has become your signature, not the silence of the defeated, but the silence of the supremely confident. When you speak now, people listen, because words from someone who has demonstrated such spiritual authority carry weight that demands attention and respect. The transformation is complete. What was meant to destroy you has instead revealed your true nature as one of the Chosen Ones, untouchable, unbreakable, and absolutely magnificent in your authentic power. Their master plan exploded in their faces, and you emerged from the smoke more radiant than ever before.